Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Today is May 20th, 2026, and we are here this afternoon in our Larimer County Commissioners Conference Room for a work session with our PBS or Budget Committee, our Budget Department, and this is a work session regarding emerging issues, analysis, and preliminary 2027 budget targets. And we're here at our Administrative Services Building in Fort Collins on the second floor in our conference room. I'm Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shad McNally, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. I welcome you today and thank you for joining us. This will be an important meeting. At the dais or at the table with me is Commissioner John Cafalas and Commissioner Kristen Stevens. Also, our County Manager is here with us, Lorinda Volker, and our PBS Performance Budget and Strategy Director, Josh Fudge, and Alex Jordan from our Mighty Budget team, who will be leading the presentation today. Excited to talk about this today, so I'm going to let you, I'm assuming Alex is leading. Josh, are you, okay, Alex, proceed, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon. So as you indicated, we're going to be talking about the Emerging Issues Survey and the initial 2027 budget targets. So for the agenda today, we'll start with reviewing actual revenues and expenses through April 2026, just to get a quick recap on how the year's going so far. We will be talking about the Emerging Issues Survey, and then we will kick off our budget season here with the 2027 budget. We'll talk about the budget process, the initial general fund support targets, and then the next steps after that for the rest of the year.
I guess, Commissioners, it's hard to believe we're already here again. It feels like we just wrapped up the budget, but budgeting is a year-long cycle, and so the work that, the direction you give today will lead the work that the departments and offices do throughout the summer in preparation for adoption. So these are estimates and targets and kind of feedback about current state, but we know that we're very early, and so we haven't locked in a lot of these things quite yet.
That's right.
Thank you, Lorinda.
So to start, for revenues year over year, property tax collections are up 5%. There was a delay in statements getting mailed out at the beginning of the year due to a statutory change, but those have since caught up. The collections have since caught up. We did have a assessment rate change this year that's affecting us, in addition to the reassessment cycle from last year. So just as a quick reminder, the residential change, the residential rate went from 6.7% with a $55,000 value reduction to 6.15% with no value reduction, and then for commercial, that's 27.9% down to 27% this year. And we'll talk later in the presentation about how that might impact homeowners and business owners. The dedicated sales tax and sales and use tax revenue is on track through March. And just as a reminder, there is that new sales tax that was approved by voters back in November, that early childhood sales tax of 0.25%. So there's a breakdown of those rates there with the total of 1.05%. For intergovernmental revenue, we're down 21%, which seems high, but this is mostly due to GOCO grants. There was a Livermore project last year in natural resources that was $2.5 million. That is not continuing on this year. Human Services and Health and Environment departments are both flat, though. And then for interest earnings, we are up 5% right now. That's normal fluctuations. This is within the range that we would expect year to year. We are anticipating a lesser amount, though, this year. That's what we have forecasted. And then for external charges for services, we have an increase of about 5% right now. Recording fees are up in part due to the statutory change there with the $40 flat fee instead of the per page charge. Landfill fees and Medicaid billing are also higher year over year. On the expense side, personnel expenses are flat, which is good. We typically anticipate an increase. There is that increase due to market adjustments at the beginning of the year. However, those increases have been offset by lower overtime. For operating expenses, which is everything that's not personnel or interdepartmental transfers, those are up about 2%. A lot of that's due to insurance right now, and there was also the Access Reader project, which has contributed to that sum. And then for capital spending, we're up about 5% year over year due to the Emergency Services Building and the Solid Waste Central Transfer Station projects. Those were both anticipated. Okay, so we are going to talk about the emerging issues survey that our department just conducted. In the past, you probably remember we had done what we called it the SWOC survey, the Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Challenges. We wanted to get some more focused responses this year, so we changed that and asked departments instead to put together a list of emerging issues. We asked about potential impacts and then best and worst case scenarios, and then if there was any potential for service proposals for additional general fund dollars. We got about 60 responses from across all of our departments, and instead of going through each and every one of those, we wanted to present just kind of a distilled list of themes and then themes across service areas. So as a general theme countywide, there's a lot of concern about rising costs, legislative changes, changes to Medicaid rates, Medicaid billing. Particularly, there's an expectation of a decrease in billing rates and a reduction in the length of authorization, but we won't know more about that until the beginning of August at the earliest. And then state and federal funding was another emerging issue theme. The level of funding that we receive from the state and federal government continues to change on an ongoing basis. It's been more volatile in the last couple of years, and some departments have expressed concern about funding cuts that may be coming up. So now just to look at each of our service areas. So to start, Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources, our CPERS departments. The major issues identified here were road deterioration due to drought. Our Road and Bridge Department expressed concern about a lack of water, which hopefully is turning around here, but the lack of water can potentially hamper dust suppression and lead to quicker road deterioration. The ranch noted rising construction costs, which could impact future capital projects. Rising software licensing costs, revenue challenges due to legislative changes and program expirations. That was in particular our Natural Resources Department was concerned about. The revenue changes due to legislation that will impact the sale of lottery and scratch card tickets. We currently receive about $800,000 from the Conservation Trust Fund from those dollars of those sales. And then for code compliance enforcement changes, this is actually a good one. This change will give staff additional flexibility to address compliance issues and could potentially reduce staff time. For public safety. Again, as I mentioned in that first slide there, an overarching theme here is Medicaid billing cuts that is in particular impacting our community justice alternatives departments. We also have capacity constraints with regards to the wellness court and AIM and the 911 call center. Rising costs of contracted services. Those are in part due to third-party billing for the district attorney's office in the coroner for toxicology and DNA testing. There's a behavioral health administration rule change that could require some additional staff time. And then our coroner mentioned employee retention and recognition. For support services, these are our finance departments, facilities, fleet, our own department here, PBS. The two major themes here were legislative changes, which are increasing workers' compensation and legal costs by our risk team, and then rising equipment and supply chain costs, in particular for our IT department. For human and economic health, once again, Medicaid billing cuts are having an impact there. This is particularly geared towards behavioral health and our health and environment departments. State and federal cuts to funding, in particular, CDPHE, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, pass-through funding to our health and environment department is set to expire, and it's unknown whether that will be renewed. There is a reduction in local public health support in the long bill. That was the long bill passed by the General Assembly at the state legislature. And then they were also expecting some cuts in emergency preparedness funding from the federal government. And then for the increased workload item there, our human services team and identified this as another bill that was impacting supplemental security income and may increase the amount of workload that their team will have to do. Okay, any questions before we move on to the timeline here?
Any questions? Okay, proceed, thank you.
Of course. So here is just an overview of our budget process. So today, obviously, we're talking about the emerging issues analysis and the general fund projections and targets. In a couple of days, we are going to be doing our budget kickoff. We're going to have our budget software rolled out for all of our departments so they can get in and start budgeting with these targets. So June through August, our summer budgeting season, all of the departments are going to be able to put together their budget requests. And then by August 14th, August 7th for capital projects and August 14th for everything else, those budgets will be due so that we can begin to review them with you. The rest of the summer, we also have public outreach, community conversations, and we are going to be doing a budget retreat. On the 17th, we will get the final recommendations from HR for compensation changes so that we can give our departments more specific direction on how to budget personnel costs. In August and September, we will meet with all of the departments to go over their submitted budgets and to talk about any service proposals that they might have. And then in September, we will be doing another retreat. We will have the initial certification of values from the assessor's office in late September, and then by October 15th, we will submit the proposed budget. Also in October, we have a work session on the proposed budget and a town hall that we'll be doing with employees. We actually have another one of those scheduled for June, and we'll talk about that at the end here. And then on November 2nd and 3rd, we have the public hearing on the proposed budget, and then obviously Election Day. The midterm elections are coming up here. Late November, we'll get those final certification of values from the assessor's office. And then in December, we will be adopting the mill levies and the budget, and we will also be collecting the mill levies from all of our taxing authorities within Larimer County. December 22nd, we will certify those, submit them to the assessor and the state, and then January 1st, we will start the whole process over again. Okay, so here is where we were going to talk about the estimated budget target assumptions. So as Lorinda mentioned, these are estimates. And we develop these through forecasting from prior year actuals. We review the state legislative council staff forecast through the state of Colorado, and then we also work with our other county departments to come up with forecasts so that we can provide some good direction to budget next year. And then just as a reminder, the way that we budget at the county is through incremental budgeting. So we take last year's budget, we add these assumptions in, and that gives us the current year budget, with the exception of a couple of departments. So starting last year, we started doing zero-based budgeting with a few departments. We will be doing those with a couple of departments this year as well. So you'll notice that when we talk about the initial targets for a couple of these departments, they are missing a target. That's because we're going to be building their budget with them together during the early stages of the summer.
Let's go with Commissioner Cafalos first, and then Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. How much do we take into consideration with regard to the state budget and loan bill that was just passed? Apparently, they considered the revenue forecasts that come from the OSPB, the Office of State Planning and Budgeting, rather than Legislative Council. And I think I just heard you say that we look at the Leg Council forecasts, for revenue, but the state in formulating the budget, if I understood correctly, looks at OSPB, which is perhaps less fiscally conservative. Are you aware of that, and you have any thoughts on that?
So when we develop these forecasts, we're pulling in information from a lot of different sources. And so I did mention the Legislative Council staff forecast. They send us a quarterly update, which we do consider. But that said, it's certainly not the only source of truth that we're going off of. We're also looking at the Federal Reserve, and like I said, talking to the Treasurer's Department and our Finance Department and the Assessor's Office to talk about what might be coming down the pipe, more specific to Larimer County. But
No, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to better understand what the differences might be in revenue forecasts if the budget bill is based on OSPB forecasts, the most recent being, I guess, in March, and then we'll see what happens in June. And we are relying on Leg Council, which tends to be more fiscally conservative. I don't know how much of and maybe Lorinda can help me here.
I'll just say, we do tend to take a much more fiscally conservative approach,
Right, I know.
especially at this point in the budget. So we would likely choose the one that is more fiscally conservative, just to make sure that we don't overextend or assume we'll have revenue that we might not get. By the time we get into summer, we'll have a better idea, and those two may come closer together. And Alex is really great at monitoring all of those sources and tweaking our model based on that.
Well, and that makes sense. If our approach is fiscally conservative and we're aligning our projections with Leg Council forecast, which is more fiscally conservative. And so I think that makes a little bit more sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you explain for the public why zero-based budgeting is a helpful exercise for departments and why we're cycling departments through that process?
yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we typically do incremental budgeting, and the reason why we do incremental budgeting is because it reduces a lot of the bureaucratic burden on departments. However, over the years, there are certain programs that become, or maybe we take for granted some of the programs that are currently running. We haven't taken a look to figure out if there's any efficiencies to be gained. And so we tried to, in this last year being budget year 2026, 2025, we started this process to go through with just a couple of departments to review, just from the ground up, what does the organization chart look like? What are our revenues? What are our expenses? How are we allocating personnel to certain areas? And are we doing that in the most efficient way possible? So it's a healthy exercise to make sure that that everything that we're doing is still needed, that there are there are no areas that need more funding or more resources, so that we're not just glossing over just with assumptions that everything from last year is still current and necessary, and we'll just add in, whatever our assumptions are for operating and personnel costs on top of that and start again next year. So it gives us a ground-up view of how the department's functioning and what their needs are, and make sure that we're allocating funding accordingly.
Thank you. I think it's important, because I know that a lot of people in our community ask us to tighten our belts or to do things more efficiently, right? And so I think that this exercise is a perfect example of how we are trying to do that, right? We're not just saying, yeah, every year you get a certain percentage more. We're saying, talk to us about your structure, how do things work, and really looking for those efficiencies. So I think that that's a really good piece to remind folks about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for emphasizing that, because it really is, we don't have the budget staff to do zero-based budgeting for the entire county. And we found no great surprises. So departments do this sort of on their own. It's nice to have it validated by the budget team coming in. The departments and offices have been fantastic partners, open to any suggestions or ideas. We may find a little bit of improvement, but maybe we need to provide more resources because they're under-resourced in a certain area. So it is a great way to validate the work that's being done at the department and office level and have other eyes on it, including yours. So, yeah, thank you for emphasizing that. It is extra work, but it's worth it.
Yeah, that was what a comment I was going to make, is something that I think we've done, or learned since I joined the board and after 2020, is the year-round budget cycle. It's not just, it is a continuous year-long discussion, and you all spend so much time with the departments, with the several proposals, and constantly looking, that I've seen every year that I've been here, we've been looking for efficiencies and combining things and looking for how we can even look for more efficiencies and innovation. And we have those innovation awards where employees find very great ways to do more with less. And I feel like, I understand the public may not always see that, but like even this meeting today and our Budget Explorer tool online, you can go find that at larimer.gov/budgetexplorer.org or .gov, I believe. It's really a helpful tool, but it's something that has been done every year that we've been here. We've had these conversations, and I know you all, that's your job, is you're looking at every line item year round. I mean, and the departments and working with folks. So I think that's an important thing to keep talking about. And it's not like all of a sudden we're looking for efficiencies. I think we've done that every year. And we're constantly, as part of our guiding principles, is being good stewards of taxpayer money and looking to be always finding efficiencies and doing better, but also providing excellence and great service, because that's what we're here, is to serve the community and provide public safety and other things. And I think that's really important to emphasize and make sure the public know that this is something that we keep refining, but we've been doing, as long as I've been on the board, this has been very impressive to me, how much work goes into it. And I know you all are very diligent about it, and I do appreciate that. I have a lot of confidence in the work that you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Okay, so to run through quickly these the assumptions that we're using for the 2027 budget. So right now we are assuming a 3.7% personnel cost increase. As I mentioned a few slides ago, this is a placeholder until we have the compensation work session with our HR department. So we'll have those final numbers in the middle of June. We're assuming a 2.5% operating cost increase. And like I mentioned before, this is everything that's not personnel or transfers. 2.25% for both external revenues and miscellaneous revenues. External revenues include charges for services, licenses and permits. And then miscellaneous revenues is like private grants and donations. For intergovernmental revenues, 1 to 3%. This is revenue that comes from the federal government, the state governments, and any other municipal governments. And then Right now, we've got a placeholder of a 2.5% increase in sales and use tax revenue. This is one that I think deserves a little bit of emphasis just because it's volatile. It's very difficult to forecast how much sales tax revenue that we're going to be getting. This last year we had a lower number forecasted, but I met with our sales tax manager this morning, and that's actually higher than expectation. So we're going to continue to watch this through the summer with current events evolving to make sure that number is a good one to forecast for 2027. But obviously, as with all of these, we can update that as we learn more.
Alex, can I ask you a real quick question on that? I'm not sure where I saw it earlier this year, but certain municipalities that said their sales tax was done, maybe certain parts, I thought in the Larimer County, or maybe it was over the state, that's an overall sales tax for ours, and I'm curious, do you guys track, I know it's probably on the budget, speculate, but do you track different areas of the county that might be seeing a dip or not? And because I don't know how Estes Park might have, with the federal changes to if they had a dip and change in tourism. I'm just curious about that. Are we watching all the municipalities and how those are up and down and how they're collecting or what that looks like? Because I know that also impacts us, but I'm just curious about that. If you have that information, if not, I would maybe offline you can send it to me or something. That would be nothing in depth, just high level. So
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great question. We do track that. In particular, our sales tax manager Tracy Hine, she's great. She sets up a meeting regularly with all of the other municipalities within Larimer County. So the city of Loveland and Fort Collins and Estes Park, and we do talk about what they are seeing, what their revenue returns are. So we do have a good idea of how things are going across the county. But that's a great point. Different, like Estes Park relies heavily on tourism, so if there's a hit to tourism for one reason or another, fuel costs, for example, we might see lower rates there. But yeah, I would be happy to send you a recap from the last meeting that we had with them.
thank you for this. I'm just curious. It's also when we're having talks with our municipal partners or other agencies, I think it's maybe good to understand what they're seeing and what they're feeling and what their budgets as we're talking about things going forward. So I'm just curious about for that reason too. So thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Commissioner Stevens, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you talk just briefly about fuel costs rising? Because the operating cost increase is 2.5%, but we know that fuel costs have risen and other costs have risen. Do we feel like that's still a safe number? I know you can't anticipate, for example, the end of a war or the opening of a strait or anything like that, but are those kind of costs, figured into what you're modeling? And it presumably might even affect this year's budget with regard to fleet and other departments.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, those assumptions are baked in with these. We are still not seeing, we are seeing higher inflation year over year. The latest figures that I saw was 3.8% year over year. We haven't adjusted these targets to factor that in, but certainly if inflation continues to rise, we'll take another look at operating costs and make changes based off of that for fuel, for example. But we do monitor on an ongoing basis, and we'll update these targets accordingly if things do change this summer.
Appreciate that, because we know probably Sheriff's Department, Road and Bridge, fleet, there's certain departments that are really affected by those changes, and we know that people in our community are also affected by that, so.
I will say that's an opportunity to have a conversation with those departments. We can't always give them the additional revenue that they need, so they have to make adjustments to their operation and be more efficient. Maybe leave a position vacant or something like that to help cover the cost. So it's a partnership between the budget office and you all and the departments and offices out there.
Thank you, that's really helpful, and so people understand that in the community, that because they're having to make changes to their budget as fuel costs and food costs go up, we do the same, and so we would look for ways to cut back to make sure that we're not overspending.
Exactly.
And I realize that you indicated we would update the numbers, but we've been dealing with this spike in especially diesel prices now for 1.5+ months. I would imagine that is creating a spike in costs, per month for these departments that rely heavily on gasoline and diesel. Do we know what that is, or?
Do we know?
Well, the cost of diesel has been approaching $6 a gallon, so these impacts are happening now.
Sure.
Real time. So has anyone expressed concerns from those departments that rely heavily on fleet about these expenses?
It's certainly something that we're watching. Sometimes the impact of these takes some time to play out. So I think over the next couple of months, we'll start to really see the impact over with those rising costs. But
Yeah, I mean, I would think we're seeing the impacts now. I just paid $48 to fill up a Prius and
right.
fill up a police car. I imagine.
You're right. So we buy fuel in bulk, and so sometimes our impact lags a bit because we may have already received, all of our tanks might be full, and but the next time we purchase fuel, we pay the extra price like everyone else.
That's a good point.
So as we get through the year, departments will be talking about what the impact is and how they're going to deal with that. And they will have to make decisions. We are a service organization. We rely on people and equipment to get our work done. And so there's going to be an impact on us. The question is what each area might do to help mitigate that impact. And it may not be the same for Road and Bridge as it is for the Sheriff's Office.
And it's a good point, forgive me for the dialogue here, but that we typically buy things in bulk, and therefore that's why some of the impact might be a little bit delayed.
That's right. And we did just take a look the other day at actuals through April, specifically with regards to fuel costs, and haven't seen an enormous impact yet with regard to those. There's some volatility there month to month, and because we only have 4 months of data, it's difficult to make a true comparison year over year, but it is something that we'll continue to watch.
Of course. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, of course.
To build off of that, Alex and Lorinda or Josh, I'm assuming that if you start to see costs like that go up, that you would mention that, or would we wait till that report? I mean, we're not going to wait till a session like this. You might, just a heads up, we're seeing, this increase in costs, and maybe we're starting to see, I've been having conversations with folks that have been calling me at home at night saying, I feel like families are really starting to feel the increased costs and rising costs of gas, and so they're going to spend less here, or they might have less that, and I'm wondering how that all kind of I don't want to say settles out, but how that all kind of interplays, if we're going to see some sales tax drop. But, we might see it up with gas. I don't know, because they have to pay more with gas, but they'll spend less here. And so I'm just curious how that all gets played out. So I'm also wondering what other indicators are on the dashboard that will start blinking warning lights that you might be able to give us an idea of what's happening. Because I just feel that the volatility, which was a word that was used in the presentation I was at earlier, and the uncertainty is something I feel kind of that desire to kind of keep up a strong pulse on right now.
So remember that economic reporting also lags. It lags at least a month. Sales tax can lag 4 to 6 weeks before we really start to see trends there. And so these folks meet regularly with the sales tax team, with the assessor, with the treasurer. So we're watching things like interest rates and what they're doing, how our investments that the treasurer makes on behalf of the county, how are those maybe offsetting. We will likely have a better idea in June than we have today. which is a little uncomfortable to start budgeting today with these kind of estimates, not knowing what's going to happen over the summer. But the budget team is embedded in the departments. They've developed a really trusting relationship. They've made themselves available as consultants for all kinds of ideas where they might find opportunities for savings, for efficiency, to address rising costs. They don't wait to tell us anymore, and so we certainly wouldn't wait to tell you.
Thank you. Josh, I saw did you have anything you wanted to add? Because I saw you talking to Alex there, so.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to remind about the sales tax lagging behind by a couple months. So we don't see that, for a couple months, unfortunately, like Lorenda mentioned. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I will turn us to our 2027 initial budget target assumptions, and our initial budget targets, I should say. Just to recap with these targets, so any one-time project funds have been removed. So service proposals and one-time projects that occurred only 1 year, those have been pulled from those targets from last year. Cyclical programs have been adjusted as needed. So anything that's ongoing, we'll take a look at to make sure that the target reflects what's happening with actual revenues and make adjustments and expenses and make adjustments accordingly. And then, as I mentioned, we will be doing zero-based budgeting for our IT, our facilities, and our coroner's office this year. So you won't see a target for those. We will be spending some time with them in the coming months to develop a target that we agree upon with them.
And a special thanks to those three areas for volunteering to be part of that for this year. I think it's great that we have an elected office. We had an elected office last time as well, and so it's nice to have them included as well as our departments that report under you all.
Absolutely. Okay, so here is a breakdown of all of the targets, and we won't go through each and every one of these, but I did want to note a couple of ones that stand out here. And just as a reminder, these are general fund support targets. So this is the gap between revenues that departments bring in and their expenditures. So, for example, if operating and personnel costs exceed the increase in anticipated revenues for a department, their target will increase year over year, and vice versa. This does not include any additional FTEs. Those are added during the regular budget cycle through service proposals. Like I said, a couple of notes here. You'll notice that most of these are, within a percentage point or two of each other. The assessor is one that's a smidge higher. This is because we have adjusted our revenue expectations to align with actuals, like I mentioned on that last slide. You'll notice that election year costs is much lower for 2027. That's because we have the election year this year for the midterm elections. And then the assessment cycle will be happening next year as well. So we've got a much higher target there, 77% increase.
So that's to conduct, for the listening public, those Board of Equalization hearings. We have hearing officers who come in, who make recommendations to you all that you adopt. And so we know in a reassessment year, there are likely to be more appeals, and there's likely to be a greater need for those folks.
Thank you. For the process improvement team note and the payroll software upgrade, these were both approved during the carryover cycle back in March. Okay, for community development, this includes an oil and gas policy consulting item also added during the carryover cycle. For engineering, we've removed the iCares floodplain monitoring. That was about $432,000, which is why their target is lower here. And then for the Americans with Disability Act capital, there was a reduction in 26 and 27 for those, but in 2028 that will be added back. We typically budget $150,000 per year for that.
And you might recall that that's because that team is working on the digital accessibility project. And so there just isn't capacity to do all of it at one time. So they will get that back in 2028.
And may I ask a question about the iCare floodplain modeling? Can you just, for the public, explain, it was just a one-time fee to get it established for monitoring, and now it's being removed, just because I'm wondering if folks are wondering a little bit more information about why that was removed and stuff, just because I'm sure that might catch someone with the word flooding their attention.
I believe that's right. Josh, do you remember?
So I was just going back through my notes to basically remember what that is. But yeah, it's development of, I wish I could say where it was. I believe it's near the Cashlaputa River on the north end of town, funding about 1.3 million over 3 years.
Okay.
To set those up.
That's what I thought. So we've accomplished that and it's all set. Okay, just want to make sure because I just know
It's a good
people are
question.
listening and
Thank
just
you.
to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. For our extension team here, this is calculated based on non-revenue funded programs. For the sheriff's office, you'll notice that there's a 0.8% increase here. This includes $2 million in reductions that we agreed on this last year with them. For the surveyor, small dollar change here. This includes just health insurance and minor operating costs only. And then one thing to note here is that we have the expenses and revenues broken off from the treasurer's office. We don't do this with all departments, but because it looks confusing that the treasurer brings in a lot more revenue than they have in expenses, and so it typically looks like they have a negative target. This is, I think, an easier way to see what their true expenses versus revenues are. And that revenue amount for the treasurer is interest and property tax collection fees. For the transfer, these are our general fund transfers to departments. So for community justice alternatives, there's a negative 1% change here. We are anticipating that this will be decreased to $0 by 2030. They've been able to increase their revenues through Medicaid billing and a recent per diem increase, which is supposed to help bring that general fund support down to zero, which is great. For the Workforce Center, the $25,000 for Regional Placecraft Initiative is not in this target. This is something that they requested last year. It's $75,000 total, $25,000 each year, and it's a match for a regional partner in economic development. The transfer to IT Capital, we have removed the funding for the door access security project from their target since that project's near completion. And then just a note about the ranch. This is fair and 4-H admin costs, and then pest control here is supplemental. This is supplemental services outside of the district area for pest control.
Can I ask a quick question about the transfer to IT for capital? I see that change, and I'm curious, that one-time door access security project, was that over all the buildings inside the county, and that includes the Justice Center?
That is all the buildings, that's right. All the facilities, we're upgrading the security to make sure that it's state-of-the-art. Ours was installed when the building was built, and it was time to redo some of those. And so not only is it the hardware, it's also the software and the project time.
Okay, and I just wanted to kind of get a bigger picture. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's all for our general fund targets and transfers. Any questions before we move on to mill levies? Okay. So this is just a breakout of the expectation for mill levy revenue, so property tax revenue for next year. You'll notice that the base general fund mill levy percentage change and the dollar amount is much lower. This is because of the assessment rate change that was passed through that special session. So for current year, like I mentioned before, it's 6.15% with no value reduction, and 27% for commercial. And then for 2027, that's going to be 6.7% with 10% off the first $700,000 for residential, and then 25% for commercial. And in the next slide, I'll show what that looks like on paper for for a business owner or for a homeowner. But in terms of our mill levy here, you'll notice that the actual mill levy does not change. Where our mill levy is set in stone, and we can't change that up or down except for on a temporary basis lower, if you decide to provide a credit. However, the things that do change here are the assessment rates and then property values when we have those reassessment cycles. For the health and environment mill levy allocation, we had a change in the interest allocation policy. So 2028, that $250,000 will be added back, but there was a reduction in the mill levy allocation there since they're getting paid with interest instead. And then just a quick note about road and bridge here as well, about the share back. Half of this mill levy revenue must be shared with the municipalities, so we only see about half of that mill levy revenue there.
So keep in mind, as we talk about mill levies, the reason these are noted as allocations is because the county gets a mill levy, and you all decide how much to give in terms of mill levy to these three operations. It doesn't add to our mill levy, and they do not have a separate mill levy, but we use it the same way we do a dollar allocation. We just back into it a little bit different using a mill levy as required by these particular services. So this is, again, not a separate tax. These are all part of the county's mill levy.
Any questions, colleagues? Okay.
Okay, and then I wanted to include this just to show what the impact. So keeping the assessment, the actual assessed value of a property fixed over these years, which obviously it doesn't. It does fluctuate. But assuming a $650,000 residential property, this gives you an idea of what the tax liability to Larimer County would be between budget years 2025 and budget year 2027. So not obviously a huge change here. With the commercial rates dropping, you do see a bigger change. So about $3,200 across both years there between budget years 26 and 27 with those reduced assessment rates. But obviously, these do add up to the county. Each of these changes add up, and it does impact the county's property tax collection.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. How do the residential assessment rate, for example, in budget year 2027, when it goes back to 6.7%, and there's a 10% reduction on the first $700,000 value of the home, how does that interact with the homestead exemption, where I believe it's still 50% of the first $200,000 of a home, if you meet the other qualifications? Do these two, is one on top of the other, or how do they interact?
That's a good question, and that's something I might need to follow up with you on. I don't know if I know off the top of my head.
You know what I'm asking, right, Alex?
Yes, yeah, I do.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just wanted to remind folks that, so their tax liability to Larimer County is going to go down if it, roughly $17. If they're if their home is worth 650,000, is that what we're saying? But that's not, I mean, we're not your total tax bill, and so I think that, just wanted to remind folks that you're not gonna see an $870 tax bill just when you own a $650,000 home, that there's other taxing entities that, including the school district, which is a large portion of most people's tax bills.
That's correct, yes, yeah, and that's a great reminder. Larimer County is only about 25% of your property tax liability, your property tax bill total, and it obviously depends on where you live in the county and what kind of districts that you live in. But yes, on average, it's about 25% of your total tax liability is going to be that $875.
I'm grateful Commissioner Stevens asked that, because I was thinking about this, because there's over, I don't remember the exact number, but you all do, it's like 250 to 300 taxing entities in Larimer County, which I think might blow some people's minds, but it certainly is something I've been considering for a long time. And I guess I want a clarification, because you mentioned metro districts. Do they have to also change the assessment rates in their collection, or is it theirs is not considered in that new formula? I'm wondering about that.
Yes, they're considered a local government, and so their assessment, these assessment rates and the actual assessed value comes from the assessor's office, and so their portion of that is the mill levy. So whatever mill levy they have set will determine what your property tax liability is. But yes, it all stems from the assessed values, which come from our assessor's office, well, from the state to our assessor's office, and then.
And as the mill levy rate, the Larimer County, the Board of County Commissioners has not raised that mill levy rate for the county since 1993, is that correct?
That's when the county debruced, that's right.
Okay. But the assessments, the people's values of their homes has gone certainly way up, and so we have no control over that. Just wanted to kind of, and now we did that once, and I know a previous board did that once where we gave a credit in a large year, but now we're, I think people got $20-30 maybe back, but I think the $17 is, I think that's great to note that it's only $17 of that total 875. So is the Budget Explorer tool going to be a change to address these changes so people can go and look at the different amounts and stuff still that is on there now?
Yeah, that's right. And the assessor's office also has a really nice tool where you can view your property tax breakdown, where it's going to each district, specific to your address. You can look up your own address and see how much you owe to each of these districts year over year, including Larimer County. But yes, the mill levy has not changed, and there are three factors there. There's the mill levy, there's the assessment rate, which has changed because of legislation at the General Assembly level over the last couple of years, and then obviously the valuation change.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
This is a great discussion because the entire tax bill is written to the Larimer County Treasurer, who then makes the disbursements, and so it is confusing to a property owner. If you're writing a check to the county, is the county keeping all of those funds? And we are not. We keep about a quarter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yeah. Just, do you know, Alex, regarding these changes to the assessment rates and their impacts on the property tax liability, what happens after budget year 2027? Are these changes at the legislative level, are they just for these years, or does everything go back to the way it was?
Great question. The rates that you see in 2027 will extend beyond indefinitely until they're changed again. So there was an incremental change that was passed with that special session where we saw the reduction and then another reduction with in the rate, and then the addition of that value reduction. But the 6.7% with 10% off of 700,000 and then 25% for commercial, those will extend indefinitely. Those were the final rates.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So just to recap here, like I said, we have the budget kickoff with staff on the 22nd. That's on Friday, and then we will allow all of the departments to start going in and building their budgets for the summer. We're going to be doing a budget town hall for employees on June 10th and then October 28th with Mr. Josh Fudge over here. We have the compensation work session with HR on the 17th, so we can get those final personnel numbers. We'll be doing a retreat with you all on the 30th of July, and then capital requests are going to be due August 7th, and operating requests due August 14th for our departments here, and then we'll start the process of proposing and adopting the budget.
Is there Commissioner Stevens that was your hand up?
Yeah, I'll be real quick. Are we planning any public outreach, or is that still to be discussed? Because I know we've tried to do public outreach around the budget. I will say, while we encourage people to contact us and attend our work sessions and attend our sessions, they have been very lightly attended. So to anyone listening in the public, we'd love to have your feedback on how we should present the budget and what format and what kind of outreach would be important to you. But Lorinda, do you know if Michelle's planning anything at this point?
I think the budget team is working with Michelle to attend as many of your community conversations as possible. We like to go out to meetings that are already there. People are already interested in what the county does. I encourage folks to email me, all of you. We have the BOCC@larimer.org email address. It's sort of a general address if anyone has any thoughts or feedback. We would love to have you come to meetings that we have scheduled, so we'll be publishing those throughout the summer once we have a proposed budget.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. So you're finished, and thank you, and appreciate all the work, and thank you for sending the slides ahead of time so we could kind of review them. And I appreciate the diligence and just how you structure things to present and to build the story. I'm always impressed how it just flows together, and I appreciate you, Lorinda, and your leadership and partnership with this budget team. You guys are small but very mighty and very effective, and I think I just want to make a special note of that because I have been on other budget proposal teams as a volunteer with school districts and things, and I'm just always impressed. The transparency, I'm not saying they're transparent, but just how you all make this seem so simple, but it's not. So I just want to thank you for that. Any other comments?
Well, just in the interest of levity, would be remiss if I didn't appreciate that you're continuing the Matthew tradition, the way you assemble the hard copies of these slides.
Thank you for noticing.
Of course I do.
And I'm sure, I'm wondering, I'm always curious, Matthew, if you're watching, I'm wondering if you're watching online right now. So if you are, we wish you all and your family well. So with that, at 2:28, we are adjourned. Thank you.